picture the sheer scale of this for a second, right? You have a massive 50,000-ton cargo ship just cutting through the waters of the Persian Gulf.
Yeah.
And suddenly the airspace is completely overwhelmed by the sound of military choppers. I mean, U.S. Marines are literally fast roping down from helicopters onto the deck of this moving Iranian-flagged vessel.
It is absolute chaos.
It really is. We are talking about tactical hostile boardings while a U.S. Navy destroyer is firing live warning shots directly across the ship's bow. This isn't some movie script. This happened this morning, and it is actively triggering a complete meltdown in the global oil markets.
And you know, the craziest part is that this is all happening while a fragile, highly publicized diplomatic ceasefire is technically still ticking down to zero.
Exactly. The geopolitical friction is just off the charts right now. But if international warfare and massive economic shockwaves aren't enough to keep you locked in, we are ending today's show with a story that is genuinely hard to process.
Oh, it's brutal.
We are talking about a rising teenage pop star, someone who is dominating the charts globally, who is suddenly sitting in a Los Angeles holding cell, facing the death penalty for a crime so horrific and bizarre, the details are going to leave you entirely speechless.
You absolutely cannot afford to miss the details coming at the end of the hour.
We are Mike and Abby, and welcome to Daily World Podcasts. Forget everything you know about boring news. We are taking the wildest, most impactful stories that hit the planet today and breaking them down so you don't have to.
Whether you are on a long drive, crushing a workout, or just feeling a little bored, we are here to keep you updated with the world and make your next hour incredibly interesting.
Because honestly, when you look at the sheer volume of chaotic systemic breakdowns crossing the wire today, it is an absolute mess out there.
Yeah, the underlying theme of today's news is just systems failing. Everything from global supply chains to local law enforcement to the human body itself.
Right. So we are starting right in the center of the geopolitical powder keg, the Persian Gulf. It is the morning of April 20th, 2026. The United States military officially confirmed the direct seizure of the MV Tosca,
Which is a large Iranian-flagged cargo vessel, right?
correct. And the tactical footage that the Pentagon decided to release to the public is intense. You have an elite maritime interdiction unit of Marines rappelling from helicopters straight down onto the top deck of this massive ship.
Wait, hold on. I need to understand the mechanics of this.
All right.
Because we are supposedly in the middle of a 2-week ceasefire right now.
Right.
So how does a ceasefire legally or even practically hold together when you have heavily armed Marines fast roping onto sovereign flag vessels in international waters? I mean, and destroyers firing artillery shells over their bows. That is a kinetic military action.
That is exactly the paradox that is tearing the region apart right now. Mechanically, it's a complete crapshoot. The U.S. argument is that they are actively enforcing a pre-existing naval blockade on Iranian energy and cargo exports. The Pentagon is basically claiming the Tosca was intentionally attempting to circumvent that established blockade.
Effectively making it a rogue vessel in their eyes.
Exactly. But to your point about the ceasefire, the Iranian government is viewing this through an entirely different lens. Iranian Foreign Ministry spokesperson Esmail Baghai was absolutely furious this morning.
I saw that.
He put out an immediate statement characterizing this tactical operation as a blatant, aggressive violation of the ceasefire terms.
Right.
And he made it crystal clear that Tehran is not going to back down from its demands regarding the immediate lifting of the U.S. naval blockade.
Which puts the entire globe on a terrifying, rapidly accelerating clock. I mean, that 2-week ceasefire officially expires on Tuesday at exactly 8 in the evening, Eastern time.
Yep.
That leaves roughly 36 hours from right now for these diplomats to figure this out, or both sides are aggressively signaling a very high likelihood of returning to active kinetic hostilities across the Gulf.
But what is truly baffling is the massive contradiction in the diplomacy right now.
Oh, the messaging is all over the place.
Right. You have Baghai screaming on state television about violations, but at the exact same moment, a senior Iranian official leaked to Reuters that Tehran is, quote, positively reviewing its participation in the upcoming Pakistan peace talks.
It is entirely schizophrenic diplomacy. I mean, you have this massive internal friction within the Iranian government. The hardline military command, the Revolutionary Guard, and the foreign ministry seem to be operating in entirely different realities.
Oh, they're playing a massive game of good cop, bad cop with the global economy.
Right. State media in Iran initially claimed there were absolutely zero plans for any officials to attend talks in Islamabad. And then, literally hours later, You get this positive review statement floating around Western media.
Meanwhile, you have Pakistani Field Marshal Asim Munir trying to thread this impossible needle as the key mediator.
Which is an impossible job.
Seriously, security sources are stating that Munir directly advised U.S. President Donald Trump that this naval blockade is the single biggest immovable obstacle to getting these peace talks off the ground.
And while the politicians posture and play these high-stakes leverage games, everyday people are getting economically slaughtered.
Oh, absolutely.
We need to look at the immediate market meltdown because the numbers that hit the wire today are just brutal.
Right.
The absolute second that helicopter footage hit the news networks, maritime insurance rates for any vessel transiting the Persian Gulf skyrocketed.
The ripple effect was instantaneous and violent. Let's look at the commodities market. Brent crude for June delivery hit $95.49 a barrel.
Wow.
That is a massive 5.65% spike in a matter of hours.
That's insane. What about WTI?
West Texas Intermediate for May delivery hit $89.10. That jumped 6.26%. Even European natural gas jumped 3.4% to 40.10 euros per megawatt hour.
Wait, what about gold? Usually people flock to gold when things get messy.
Actually, gold dropped 1.2% to $4,820.60.
Interesting.
Yeah, and the U.S. dollar index ticked up slightly to 98.24.
But we can't just rattle off numbers. What does a 6% spike in crude actually mean for the listener? We have to look at the ground-level reality here.
Okay, lay it out.
In the United Kingdom, the British Oil Security Syndicate just released a report detailing a 19% spike in fuel drive-offs over this past weekend alone.
19%.
19%. That means 1 in 5 people who previously would have paid for their gas are now literally filling up their tanks, looking at the total on the pump, panicking, and flooring it out of the gas station without paying because they simply cannot afford it.
That is wild.
Analysts are aggressively warning that if oil stays above $100 a barrel, it adds roughly $140 to the annual fuel costs of the average motorist. This geopolitical posturing in the Gulf isn't an abstract concept. It immediately forces regular people into economic desperation.
You want to talk about desperation? Let's look at what this naval blockade is forcing sovereign regional governments to do.
Yeah.
Because the Strait of Hormuz is essentially choked off by U.S. warships, Iraq just made a massive, incredibly risky pivot. As of Monday, Iraqi border officials formally announced they are reopening the Rabia border crossing.
And just to paint a geographic picture for the audience, that crossing connects Iraq's northern Nineveh province directly into Syrian territory.
Right.
It is a border crossing that has been locked down and closed for over a decade due to the brutal civil war and insurgent presence.
Right, and they are reopening it specifically to facilitate the overland export of their fuel oil. I mean, they're going to load massive tankers onto trucks and drive them straight through Syrian territory just to get their product to the Mediterranean ports where it can actually be sold.
Wow.
They are also opening it for general commercial trade, which has been practically non-existent since the Syrian civil conflict started turning that region into a wasteland.
Which is completely mind-boggling when you think about the logistics. Isn't northern Syria still incredibly dangerous?
Extremely.
You have local insurgent activity, fractured territories controlled by different warlords, and absolutely zero guaranteed security for a commercial convoy.
Yeah.
The sheer level of desperation required for Baghdad and Damascus to publicly collaborate on an insurgent-heavy truck route just to bypass the U.S. blockade is staggering. They're looking at the math and deciding they're willing to risk driving highly explosive fuel convoys straight through an active war zone rather than deal with the Persian Gulf right now.
It is a vital economic lifeline for Iraq, and they are taking the gamble because the alternative is complete national bankruptcy.
Exactly.
But this whole situation with oil blockades just highlights the broader, long-term war happening in the background of all these skirmishes. I'm talking about the global resource war.
Oh, the scramble for minerals.
Right. Which brings us to a massive financial move made on Monday by a company called USA Rare Earth. They just announced a staggering $2.8 billion cash and stock deal to acquire 100% of the Serra Verde Group.
That is a massive Brazilian mining conglomerate, correct?
Correct. And this is not just a business acquisition. This is a massive geopolitical play to secure critical minerals entirely outside of the Chinese supply chain.
Because for decades, China has maintained a total stranglehold on these elements.
Right. Serra Verde operates one of the world's few large-scale ionic clay deposits of rare earth elements located entirely outside of China.
Let's clearly define what we're talking about here.
Yeah.
What is the actual geological difference between an ionic clay deposit and regular mining? Why does that specific technical distinction justify a nearly $3 billion price tag?
It all comes down to the brutal economics of cost and the ease of extraction.
Right.
Think of traditional rare earth mining, which is hard rock mining, as trying to find a needle by blowing up an entire mountain.
Sounds expensive.
It is incredibly expensive. It's wildly environmentally destructive, and it requires massive, highly toxic industrial processing facilities just to separate the valuable elements from the useless rock.
Okay, so what about ionic clay?
Ionic clay deposits, on the other hand, are entirely different. They are essentially surface-level dirt where the rare earth elements are only loosely bonded to the clay particles.
Oh, interesting.
You can think of it like washing the dirt off a potato instead of blasting through solid granite.
That is a great analogy.
You can extract these highly valuable elements significantly cheaper, faster, and with a fraction of the environmental impact. And these elements are entirely non-negotiable for the future of human infrastructure. We are talking about the core materials required to build permanent magnets for electric vehicles, massive wind turbines, and highly advanced defense technology like the F-35 fighter jet.
So this is the United States private sector actively trying to buy its way into supply chain independence, entirely bypassing Beijing.
Right.
And this is happening precisely as the U.S. government is heavily pushing tax incentives for companies that extract and process critical minerals entirely within the Americas. The Pela-Ima project they just acquired down in Brazil is already in advanced commercial production.
So it's not a pipe dream.
No, this isn't some speculative play.
Yeah.
They are buying immediate output. But it really forces a much bigger, uncomfortable question.
Let's hear it.
If you are watching on YouTube right now, drop a comment. Do you genuinely think this Western decoupling from the Chinese supply chain is actually going to work? Or is it just a massive, incredibly expensive Band-Aid? Because $2.8 billion is a massive corporate flex, but against the sheer scale of China's infrastructure, is it enough to actually shift global reliance?
That $2.8 billion flex is wild, but it completely pales in comparison to the absolute bloodbath happening at the U.S.-Mexico border right now.
Yeah, this border situation is incredibly dark, the geopolitics are highly volatile, and the timing of this event is highly, highly suspicious.
Let's lay out the established facts meticulously. Sunday, April 19th, a convoy of 5 official vehicles is traveling together on a very difficult-to-access winding mountain road in the northern Mexican state of Chihuahua.
Okay.
Without warning, one of the vehicles in the convoy violently skids off the road and plunges deep into a ravine. 4 people are killed. 2 of those victims were high-ranking Mexican State Investigation Agency directors, Pedro Roman Oseguera Cervantes and Manuel Genaro Mendez Montes. The other 2 victims inside that vehicle were official U.S. Embassy personnel, formally designated as instructor officers.
The U.S. Ambassador Ronald Johnson held a briefing and confirmed Monday morning that the American officials actually survived the initial brutal impact of the crash.
Wait, they survived the fall?
They sustained severe life-threatening injuries but were successfully extracted and made it to a regional hospital before ultimately being pronounced dead on Sunday night.
Right.
But you cannot view this crash in a vacuum.
Right.
You have to look at the immediate high-stakes context surrounding what this convoy was actually doing in Chihuahua.
Exactly. They weren't just on some leisurely diplomatic drive through the mountains. This specific group of personnel was returning from a highly successful, intensely dangerous 3-month joint investigation. That investigation culminated in a massive, coordinated weekend raid in the municipality of Morelos. We are talking about the total dismantling of 6 clandestine synthetic drug laboratories. They successfully destroyed over 5,000 pounds of raw methamphetamine.
Wow.
Yeah, thousands of liters of highly toxic chemical precursors and massive pieces of heavy industrial manufacturing equipment were seized and destroyed. It was described by authorities as one of the largest, most sophisticated meth production facilities ever discovered in the entire country.
And this is exactly where the official narrative feels a little too convenient for anyone paying attention.
You think?
I mean, you pull off a historic multi-million-dollar raid that effectively cripples a massive piece of cartel infrastructure. And on the drive home, your lead vehicle just happens to mysteriously skid off a mountain. I am looking at this accident narrative with intense, justifiable skepticism.
Especially given the broader political climate. Right now, the U.S. administration is openly, publicly considering unilateral military action against cartel infrastructure directly inside Mexico.
Which has the Mexican government incredibly on edge.
Exactly. The timing of 2 U.S. Embassy personnel dying in a ravine immediately after crippling a major cartel asset. It raises massive operational security questions. Was this retaliation? Was the vehicle compromised?
It is a profoundly volatile situation that could easily spark a massive diplomatic crisis if foul play is definitively proven.
It is a powder keg. But as devastating as that loss of life is at the border, we unfortunately have to pivot to a domestic tragedy that is almost impossible to emotionally process.
We do. We need to take a breath, be very clear, and stick strictly to the facts here, because the details coming out of Louisiana are simply horrifying.
Early Sunday morning in Shreveport, a man named Shamar Elkins carried out a methodical shooting spree across 2 separate homes in a single residential neighborhood. He killed 8 children.
8 children, ranging in age from just 1-year-old up to 12 years old. And the detail that makes this entirely incomprehensible, 7 of those children were his own.
It is officially the deadliest mass shooting involving children in the United States since January of 2024. Elkin's wife, Shaniqua, was critically wounded in the attack but survived. Her sister and another child only managed to escape the house by literally climbing out of a window and jumping off the roof of the house to flee the gunfire.
And the systemic, bureaucratic failures leading up to this exact moment are glaring and entirely unacceptable. On Monday, Shreveport Police Chief Wayne Smith held a very tense press conference to confirm the mechanical details of the attack.
Right.
Elkins used an assault-style rifle to carry out the massacre. But here is the critical failure. He was a 2019 convicted felon.
Which means?
He was legally, unequivocally barred from possessing any firearm of any kind, let alone an assault-style weapon.
Elkins himself is dead. Following a massive high-speed police pursuit on Sunday afternoon, he crashed his vehicle and died. Though, as of Monday afternoon, the coroner's office is still waiting on a final autopsy report to confirm if he was killed by officer return fire during the standoff or if it was a self-inflicted gunshot wound.
But what makes this entire horrific event even more tragic is the timeline of the legal system. The shooting happened exactly 24 hours before Elkins and his wife were scheduled to appear in court for a highly contentious separation hearing on Monday morning.
Cato Parish Sheriff Henry Whitehorn also spoke at the press conference on Monday, and he didn't mince words or offer hollow condolences.
No, he didn't.
He issued a stark call for a citywide reckoning on how local authorities handle domestic violence. He flat out admitted to the cameras that the community, the legal system, and the law enforcement apparatus completely failed to prevent what was a highly predictable, statistically common escalation of violence.
When a convicted felon facing a tense separation hearing is somehow able to easily procure an assault-style weapon and wipe out an entire family, the system is fundamentally broken. It is a somber, horrific reality check on how vulnerable the most at-risk people in these communities really are.
It truly is. It is a systemic failure at every single level of intervention. We are reporting the facts, but the sheer, senseless loss of life is just staggering. It leaves a massive void in that community.
It really does. It is going to take Shreveport a very long time to recover from something like that.
Shifting our focus entirely, but staying on the domestic front, there was a major unprecedented development out of the White House on Monday regarding federal policy and veteran health care. President Trump signed an executive order intended to heavily accelerate research, fund clinical trials, and expand access to plant-based psychedelic therapies for military veterans.
Wait, I need to understand the legal mechanics of this because it sounds contradictory.
How so?
Psychedelics, like psilocybin or ibogaine, are largely classified as Schedule I substances by the DEA, meaning the federal government technically views them as having no accepted medical use and a high potential for abuse. How does a simple stroke of a pen on an executive order suddenly bypass the DEA and open up clinical trials at federal facilities?
Mechanically, the executive order forces the Department of Veterans Affairs and other relevant federal health agencies to drastically streamline their internal approval processes for these specific innovative therapies.
Okay.
It specifically targets the bureaucratic, legal, and logistical barriers that have historically bottlenecked this exact research. For years, veterans suffering from severe treatment-resistant PTSD or traumatic brain injuries have been forced to travel entirely outside the United States.
Right, to places like Mexico or Costa Rica.
Exactly, spending thousands of dollars out of pocket to go to unregulated clinics to seek out ibogaine or psilocybin treatments simply because it was federally prohibited to conduct those treatments here. This order directs federal agencies to stop treating these substances merely as illicit drugs and start prioritizing them as a critical research area.
Fast-tracking clinical trials under strict modern medical supervision.
Exactly.
It is actually a massive philosophical shift for the federal government. The national commander of the Disabled American Veterans, Coleman Nee, publicly applauded the executive action immediately.
Yeah, the DAV is fully on board.
He stated that this order is going to close a critical, deadly treatment gap for the invisible wounds of war, where conventional, highly addictive pharmaceuticals have frankly failed a massive percentage of veterans. This is the very first time the U.S. federal government has officially designated psychedelic substances as a prioritized, highly funded research area specifically for veterans' health care.
The DAV even launched a comprehensive digital resource on Monday just to help vets navigate this entirely new legal landscape and figure out how to enroll in these upcoming trials.
Shifting over from federal policy to state-level politics, the state of Virginia is currently in the middle of a highly unusual, incredibly contentious Democratic experiment right now.
Yeah, on Monday, the Commonwealth held a rare special election regarding a major constitutional amendment. The Democratic Majority General Assembly is directly asking the voters to grant them temporary, sweeping authority to redraw state congressional district lines.
And the only reason they are asking for this power back is because the Independent Redistricting Commission, which was specifically created to stop politicians from drawing their own lines, is completely, hopelessly deadlocked.
They have entirely failed to finalize the map boundaries for the upcoming 2026 midterm election cycle.
So the state legislature is basically stepping in and saying, you guys failed your one job, give us the pen back immediately so we can ensure legal maps are in place before the midterms become a constitutional crisis.
Exactly, and the campaigning around this single issue has been unbelievably intense. Over the last 24 hours leading up to the vote, there were massive, multi-million-dollar advertising pushes blanketing the airwaves in key areas like Arlington and Madison.
Bringing in high-profile endorsements from national party leaders on both sides of the aisle.
Right. Proponents of the amendment are heavily framing this as a necessary, critical step to save state democracy and ensure a functional election can actually take place. Opponents are screaming that it is a blatant partisan power grab designed to usher in a return to severe political gerrymandering.
Virginia is the only state in the entire nation right now holding a statewide special election specifically to strip power away from an independent, citizen-led commission and hand that immense power directly back to elected politicians.
Which is incredibly high stakes because whoever draws those lines is going to determine the boundary lines for multiple key swing seats in the United States House of Representatives. The local stakes are national stakes.
I am genuinely curious about the audience perspective on this. If you are watching on YouTube right now, hit the comments and tell us, should state politicians ever be trusted to draw their own district lines? Or is the independent commission model, even when it completely deadlocks and fails, the absolute only way to prevent political corruption?
It's a tough call. Both sides are aggressively arguing they're the ones protecting democracy, but the mechanics of who holds the pen changes everything.
Definitely.
Rounding out our domestic coverage, the United States Navy made a massive, surprisingly critical infrastructure announcement on Monday. Vice Admiral Scott Gray, the commander of Navy Installations Command, announced a major multi-year expansion of the Navy's child and youth programs.
They are officially opening more than 900 new, highly subsidized childcare spaces at key fleet concentration areas by the year 2028.
And this isn't just a promise to eventually build new daycares, which typically takes years of bureaucratic red tape and construction delays. They are getting incredibly creative with the space they have.
Oh yeah, they instantly opened 154 spaces at Naval Base Kitsap by completely gutting and converting a former chapel and community center into a modern, fully staffed child development center.
They also have 4 major military construction projects currently underway at installations like Point Loma, Kitsap, and Joint Expeditionary Base Little Creek Fort Story.
The reason this is top-tier military news, and not just a local zoning update, is because childcare is a massive, critical operational readiness and retention issue for the armed forces. It is not a perk. It is a necessity.
Right. If highly trained sailors cannot secure affordable, reliable childcare, they simply leave the service. To support the families constantly moving around the globe, the Navy is fully implementing what is called the Early Learning Matters, or ELM, curriculum across all their development centers globally by the end of fiscal year 2026.
Right, because military children deal with permanent change gestation moves constantly. The ELM curriculum provides a totally standardized, predictable learning environment.
So if a child moves from a base in San Diego to a base in Japan in the middle of the year, the classroom structure, the lessons, and the curriculum are exactly the same.
Which drastically reduces the psychological stress and academic disruption of the move. Plus, the Navy is adding 1,000 new fee assistance spaces to the military childcare in your neighborhood program to help heavily offset the financial costs for families who are forced to use civilian daycares because the base facilities are full.
We'll get back to the fallout of all this domestic policy in a second, but first you absolutely have to hear what is happening right now in the AI and tech world, because your white-collar job might literally be evaporating as we speak.
Yeah, if you work in law, finance, or any analytical field, you need to be paying very close attention to this next story because the paradigm just shifted.
On Monday, Thomson Reuters announced a fundamental foundational shift in their co-counsel legal AI platform. To give you scale, over 1 million professionals across 107 countries actively use this software. Previously, it was a traditional prompt-driven model. You type in a legal question, it reads its database, and it gives you an answer. But as of April 20th, they are moving the entire platform to a fully autonomous agentic infrastructure.
We need to clearly define what agentic actually means in this context because it is terrifyingly efficient.
Tell me.
It means the artificial intelligence is no longer sitting there waiting for you to tell it what to do step by step. The system can now autonomously plan its own complex multi-step workflows.
So it thinks for itself.
It can identify a problem, figure out what external software tools it needs to use, call those tools, analyze the incoming results, course correct if it finds an error, and iterate through incredibly complex legal tasks with almost zero human intervention.
It is shifting from a tool you use to a digital employee that works for you.
Exactly. They're explicitly targeting what they call long-running tasks. We're talking about complete, exhaustive document discovery across thousands of files. We're talking about multi-step litigation planning and risk assessment.
Things that used to reliably take a massive team of junior associates, weeks of billable hours to comb through, can now be executed by a digital agent autonomously running in the background while the senior partner sleeps.
The beta for this agentic system launched Monday, with general availability rolling out later this year. But here is the massive red flag that industry watchdogs are screaming about. Shadow AI.
Shadow AI.
Chief healthcare executive and several prominent legal industry analysts are loudly sounding the alarm on this rapid deployment. When you have highly autonomous agents executing high-stakes, nuanced legal and compliance research without constant human oversight, the risk of hallucination or unverified flawed logic chains goes completely through the roof.
Oh, man. If the AI hallucinates a case precedent and quietly weaves it into a 50-page litigation plan, who catches it?
Exactly. And frankly, the bigger economic question. What happens to the entire foundational pipeline of junior lawyers? If a machine can do massive document discovery instantly and accurately, law firms simply aren't going to hire first-year associates at $150,000 a year to do grunt work.
You are effectively severing the traditional training ground for the next generation of legal professionals. This is the exact moment AI officially shifts from being a glorified, highly articulate chatbot to an actual independent digital colleague that works infinitely faster and vastly cheaper than you do.
It is a fundamental, potentially catastrophic disruption of white-collar labor markets.
And speaking of massive disruptions in the tech space, the hardware world just saw a massive leap forward. Huawei just officially unveiled their new flagship phone, the Pura X Max, over in China. It is a wide, book-style, foldable phone, and the technical specifications they just released on this piece of hardware are completely absurd.
I read the spec sheet. The display metrics on this piece of hardware are entirely unnecessary and, frankly, a little unhinged.
Let's break it down. It features a 5.4-inch cover display for when the phone is closed. But when you open it up, it reveals a massive 7.7-inch internal OLED display.
Under the hood, it is running on the highly advanced Kirin 9030 chipset, powered by their proprietary Harmony OS 6.1.
It packs a massive 5,150 milliamp-hour battery supported by 66-watt wired fast charging.
Yeah.
The camera rig on the back is professional grade. a 50 megapixel primary sensor, a 12.5 megapixel ultra-wide lens, and a 50 megapixel periscope telephoto lens for insane zoom capabilities.
But the craziest, most talked about stat is the raw brightness of the screens.
Oh, yeah.
The internal foldable display hits a peak brightness of 3,000 nits, and the outer cover display hits a peak brightness of 3,500 nits.
Because exactly what humanity needs right now in an era of digital exhaustion is a piece of glass so intensely, aggressively bright it literally sears your corneas while you are doom scrolling the news in bed at 2 in the morning.
3,500 nits is not a smartphone screen. It is a tactical military flashlight. You could signal an airplane with that display.
It is aggressively, almost violently bright. And the wide book design form factor means when it opens, it doesn't have that weird, awkwardly narrow candy bar aspect ratio that plagued early foldables.
It actually functions as a proper, fully proportioned tablet.
Right. It hits the market starting at roughly $1,613 US. But here is the massive catch for anyone listening. You are probably never going to see one of these in person.
Because of ongoing geopolitical tensions and security concerns, Huawei products are heavily banned by the FCC, so this technological marvel is entirely locked out of the United States market.
Which is fascinating because it leaves the American consumer market entirely locked out of what looks like a major generational leap in hardware form factors. But if we want to look at a leap in hardware that actually impacts global infrastructure, we need to look at energy storage.
Because a development just hit the wire that could actually solve one of the single biggest bottlenecks preventing the transition to green energy on the planet. Phenom, a company trading under the ticker PHNMF, announced Monday that its partner company, MK+, has officially successfully entered the commercialization phase for their highly experimental vanadium solid-state battery technology.
And this isn't just some wild R&D claim meant to pump a stock price. MK Plus just fully secured a massive 2.5 gigawatt-hour commercial battery order from the Austrian state of Burgenland.
This project isn't just a local pilot. It has official, massive financial backing and strategic support from the European Union. MK Plus already secured a massive manufacturing plant in Sweden and successfully publicly demonstrated a 500 watt-hour battery module that effortlessly passed all stringent international safety and performance certifications.
Let's put this into perspective because the engineering claims they are making are completely industry-breaking. Think about traditional lithium-ion batteries, the kind in your phone, or a Tesla, like a crowded, highly volatile nightclub.
Okay, like that.
Everyone is packed in, it generates a massive amount of heat, and if you don't have massive, expensive, heavy air conditioning, meaning liquid cooling systems, the whole thing catches on fire.
Right.
They're stating this new vanadium solid-state battery is fundamentally different. It is like an organized, perfectly air-conditioned warehouse.
It charges an astonishing 100 times faster than a traditional lithium-ion battery. It offers 150 times more total charge cycles before the chemical degradation ruins the battery.
And because the solid-state architecture doesn't generate the same volatile thermal runaway, it doesn't require those intense, heavy, expensive liquid cooling systems.
Because of that, they claim the total massive grid-scale storage system costs are 75% lower than current market standards.
75% cheaper to build and maintain, and 100 times faster to charge. If those specific metrics actually hold up when deployed at grid scale in Austria, traditional lithium technology is completely dead in the water for stationary energy storage.
Plus, there is a massive environmental angle. The vanadium solid-state design is entirely 100% recyclable. You can just extract the vanadium and reuse it indefinitely, which completely solves the massive, looming toxic waste crisis we currently have, with millions of dead, highly toxic lithium EV batteries piling up in landfills.
This Burgenland order is essentially a massive, highly visible pilot program for multi-billion euro energy storage projects rolling out across the entire European Union. Phenom currently holds a highly lucrative 5% equity interest in MK Plus through an exclusive offtake agreement. So if you follow the energy sector, keep an eye on that ticker.
It is a total revolution in how we store power. But shifting from hardware engineering to actual, incredibly complex human biology.
Oh boy, this one is tough.
The FDA just threw a massive, highly controversial wrench into what was shaping up to be one of the most promising Alzheimer's and dementia treatments we have seen in decades. Passage Bio, trading under the ticker PHG, released highly anticipated interim data on Monday from their ongoing Phase 1/2 clinical trial for PBFT02.
This is a highly advanced, targeted gene therapy specifically engineered to combat frontotemporal dementia caused by very specific progranulin gene mutations.
Frontotemporal dementia is a brutal, aggressive disease that physically shrinks the frontal and temporal lobes of the brain, but the clinical data Passage Bio released is staggering.
For patients who were treated in the early stages of the disease, receiving this single-dose gene therapy resulted in an average 64% reduction in total whole brain atrophy over a 12-month period when directly compared to the natural, untreated history of the disease.
It also showed a highly specific 54% reduction in frontotemporal cortex atrophy.
We really need to dig into the specific biomarkers here to understand the mechanism, because this is where the medical science gets genuinely wild.
Yeah, they measured a protein called plasma neurofilament light chain, or NFL. Think of NFL like the smoke coming from a fire inside the brain.
It is a protein biomarker that actively circulates in the blood, indicating active, ongoing neuronal damage and cell death. If your brain cells are rapidly dying, your NFL levels drastically go up.
In the untreated natural history control group, NFL levels aggressively increased by 13.5 picograms per milliliter as the disease ravaged their brains. But in the patients actively treated with gene therapy, the NFL levels didn't just slow down their ascent, they actually stabilized entirely, showing a mean reduction of 1.0 picograms per milliliter.
It literally measurably halted the physical brain damage.
Furthermore, the therapy successfully raised progranulin levels in the patient's cerebrospinal fluid from a depleted state of below 3 nanograms per milliliter all the way up to 24.2, which is actually significantly above the upper limit of what you would find in a perfectly healthy adult.
It is, by all available metrics, basically a medical miracle for those early-stage patients. Unfortunately, patients with much more advanced stages of the disease showed almost no measurable clinical improvement, so they are being completely excluded from all future trials.
But here's where the story turns into a bureaucratic nightmare. Despite this incredible, objectively brain-saving data, the FDA just stepped in and built a massive, insurmountable regulatory wall.
They officially informed Passage Bio that their current single-arm study design is no longer sufficient for full approval. The FDA is now forcing the company to conduct a massive, highly expensive, full randomized controlled registrational trial for any further development.
And we need to talk about the brutal ethics of what the FDA is demanding. A randomized controlled trial means Passage Bio is now legally required to give a completely ineffective placebo to a control group of human beings actively suffering from aggressive terminal brain atrophy, just to prove a statistical point.
All while demanding the company spend tens of millions of dollars and years of extra time they simply do not have.
Because of this massive, unexpected moving of the regulatory goalposts by the FDA, Passage Bio announced on Monday they are immediately entering a formal strategic review process. For anyone who doesn't speak Wall Street, that is corporate code for we are rapidly running out of money and desperately looking for a larger pharmaceutical buyer to acquire us just to survive the crushing financial burden the FDA just forced onto our balance sheet.
That alone is wild, but it completely pales in comparison to the absolute mess we're about to get into regarding global diplomacy and the sheer chaos of pop culture. Prepare yourself for this whiplash.
We are going straight from cutting-edge, life-saving gene therapy into the weirdest, most jarring mix of ballistic missiles and celebrity murder charges imaginable.
Let's start with the missile launch. North Korea, Sunday morning, exactly 6:10 a.m. local time. Supreme Leader Kim Jong-un, highly visibly accompanied by his young daughter, stood on a fortified observation deck and proudly watched his military launch 5 Hwasong-11 Ra surface-to-surface tactical ballistic missiles.
The state-run Korean Central News Agency aggressively reported that the missiles flew roughly 85 miles out over the Sea of Japan and successfully simultaneously saturated a highly specific target area of roughly 31 to 32 acres on a remote, uninhabited island.
But we have to ask, why does this specific test matter on the global stage? North Korea tests short-range ballistic missiles all the time to rattle the cage. South Korean radar installations at Sinpo easily detected them the second they launched.
So what makes this specific Ra variant of this missile so different and highly concerning to military intelligence?
It is entirely about the payload. The Ra variant doesn't use a traditional single high-explosive warhead designed to take out a single building. It is specifically engineered to carry high-density cluster munitions.
Oh, wow. Okay, that entirely changes the threat matrix. So this isn't about precision striking a reinforced bunker or a specific command center. Cluster munitions are indiscriminate area denial weapons.
You use them when your goal is to blanket an entire geographic grid square with hundreds of smaller, highly lethal explosives. This is a weapon intended purely for the theater-level suppression of mass troops, exposed defensive lines, and large-scale staging areas.
They are explicitly publicly testing their ability to annihilate massive staging grounds, and they intentionally timed this specific test to perfectly coincide with the highly publicized start of joint combat drills between United States forces and the Philippines. China's foreign ministry even chimed in on the situation, officially calling the U.S.-Philippines military drills a direct threat to regional tranquility, essentially backing Pyongyang's aggressive posture.
Exactly. South Korean and U.S. military intelligence are currently frantically scrubbing all the intercepted telemetry data to see if any new, highly advanced propulsion or terminal guidance systems were secretly tested during this launch window.
It is highly notable that KCNA made sure to heavily highlight Kim's daughter being present at the launch, aggressively pushing this domestic narrative of generational continuity for their nuclear and ballistic missile programs. They are signaling they aren't going anywhere.
Meanwhile, as the United States is entirely distracted by the military drills in the Philippines and trying to salvage the Pakistan peace talks regarding the Gulf blockade, the European Union is making a massive, highly calculated power play in the Middle East. On Monday, high-level diplomatic representatives from 60 different nations formally convened in Brussels for a major Palestinian stability summit.
This massive diplomatic gathering was co-hosted by Belgian Foreign Minister Maxime Prévost and the European Union's top diplomat, Kaja Kallas. The primary guest of honor, essentially, was Palestinian Prime Minister Mohammed Mustafa.
And he wasn't there to smile for a photo op or discuss abstract two-state solutions. He was urgently, desperately requesting immediate international financial aid and hard security guarantees to prevent the total, imminent administrative and economic collapse of the Palestinian Authority operating in the West Bank.
Belgian officials speaking at the summit were incredibly blunt, openly stating to the press that the realistic prospect of achieving a two-state solution is rapidly, perhaps permanently, dimming. You have the ongoing catastrophic devastation in Gaza, where local health officials reported that Israeli airstrikes killed at least 2 more Palestinians on Monday in the Bureau's refugee camp in Gaza City, coupled with rapidly escalating settler violence and military raids in the West Bank.
But if you look at the geopolitics of this summit, this is the European Union deliberately, highly visibly, stepping entirely out of the shadow of United States diplomacy. They are aggressively asserting their own independent influence in the region, especially since several European nations present at this summit have recently broken ranks with Washington and officially recognized Palestinian statehood. It is a massive historic shift in the European diplomatic consensus.
All right, take a deep breath, because we are hard pivoting away from global diplomacy and going straight to Los Angeles, and the details of this story are incredibly grim.
The massively popular rising teenage pop star, known as D4VD, has been officially formally charged with the first-degree murder of 14-year-old Celeste Rivas.
This is the heartbreaking case that initially started making headlines 7 months ago when her body was tragically discovered, right?
Yes, it is. On Monday morning, the Los Angeles Police Department officially released his booking photo to the public following his high-profile arrest on Thursday afternoon. He is currently being held in maximum security without bail, pending his formal arraignment.
But the district prosecutors held a massive press conference on Monday, and the specific charges they filed are absolutely devastating.
Yeah.
He's not just facing standard first-degree murder. The prosecutors officially filed special circumstances under California state law, which instantly, officially makes him eligible for the death penalty.
For those who don't follow the legal system, special circumstances mean the prosecution firmly believes they have rock-solid evidence of severe, heinous aggravating factors that go far beyond the act of murder itself. What else did the district attorney charge him with in the filing?
He was formally charged with lewd and lascivious acts with a child under 14 years of age and the gruesome mutilation of a human corpse.
That is horrifying on a level that is hard to articulate. To go from topping global music streaming charts, playing sold-out arenas, to suddenly facing capital murder and mutilation charges for the death of a child.
But there's also this incredibly bizarre, entirely unexplained detail floating around the peripheral local reporting that makes the whole thing feel surreal. Late-night talk show host Jimmy Kimmel was reportedly spotted by multiple people at the exact scene of the singer's arrest on Thursday afternoon.
Yes, TMZ and several local LA News helicopters reported that Kimmel was seen standing at the location during the police raid. But official law enforcement spokespeople have completely aggressively refused to clarify if he has any actual connection to the parties involved, if he was providing a tip, or if he literally just happened to be walking in the area during a major SWAT operation.
The entire situation is an absolute horrific tragedy, and the tonal shift in the entertainment world right now is just surreal. Because while that unimaginable horror is unfolding in a Los Angeles courthouse, the massive music industry machine is completely ignoring it and still churning out massive, highly promoted releases.
Yeah, the contrast of realities is insane. Over the weekend, pop icon Madonna made a massive, highly secretive surprise guest appearance during Sabrina Carpenter's headlining set at the Coachella Music Festival. The crowd reportedly went entirely electric.
And her PR team brilliantly used that exact momentum to officially drop a brand new, highly anticipated single on Monday morning titled, I Feel So Free. It is the official lead track for her highly anticipated sequel album, Confessions 2, which industry insiders say is a massive return to her highly successful 2005 Grammy-winning electronic dance era.
The track was an instant smash, immediately hitting the top 5 on global streaming charts within hours. But there was some rapid-fire industry drama surrounding the release. The Hollywood trade publication Variety ran a massive headline implying, based on a quote, that Madonna might be permanently done with massive global touring due to the physical toll.
Her longtime manager, Guy Oseary, immediately took to his massive Instagram following to aggressively correct the record. He clarified a heavily misquoted, out-of-context interview from the recent Breakthrough Prize ceremony, stating unequivocally that Madonna will absolutely tour again. She is desperate to share this new music live with her fans. They just simply do not have finalized, locked-in routing dates yet.
Oh, and for the pop culture completionists out there tracking every major release, industry insiders also leaked on Monday that Lady Gaga and hip-hop artist Doechii are actively in the studio collaborating on an original, high-energy track specifically for the highly anticipated soundtrack of The Devil Wears Prada 2.
Which is going to be massive for both of them. But perhaps the biggest, most impactful music drop on Monday came from Olivia Rodrigo. She released the highly stylized official music video for her new lead single, Drop Dead, on YouTube. It is the flagship track from her brand new, highly conceptual album titled, You Seem Pretty Sad for a Girl So in Love.
I love that title. It is apparently a direct, verbatim quote from a fan interaction that went massively viral on TikTok during her last sold-out world tour. The visual aesthetic is totally different this time around. Music critics are universally calling it a raw, deeply melancholic, grunge pop evolution of her sound.
Her audience was clearly starving for this new era, because the music video racked up a staggering 5 million views in just 6 hours on Monday.
Rodrigo also debuted several of the new tracks live at Coachella this weekend, officially earning high praise from the local Department of Tourism for bringing massive economic activity to the area. But her highly emotional release sparked a really weird, unexpected parallel conversation in the industry. Carl, a prominent member of the massively popular P-pop group BNI, used Rodrigo's highly emotional, deeply personal new era to launch into a massive public critique of the use of artificial intelligence in music production.
He urged artists and producers to strictly focus on the human soul and emotional imperfections that artificial intelligence simply cannot replicate in a sterile algorithm.
And honestly, he is not wrong to be terrified. When you look at the highly autonomous AI lawyers from Thomson Reuters we talked about earlier, it is only a matter of time before an agentic AI is autonomously generating entire, highly polished Spotify playlists based on algorithmic calculations of human heartbreak, completely bypassing the artist entirely.
Moving from the stage to the streets, the sports world had a massive day. Monday was officially Patriots Day in Massachusetts, which means the city hosted the historic 130th running of the legendary Boston Marathon. And the times we saw posted on that course were nothing short of historic.
The environmental conditions were absolutely perfect for shattering records. Mild 45-degree temperatures and a very solid, consistent tailwind pushed the entire elite field of runners to their absolute physical limits.
Kenyan distance runner John Career successfully defended his championship title and won the elite men's division with a staggering, almost incomprehensible time of 2 hours, 1 minute, and 52 seconds. That is an unofficial, massive new course record.
He literally shaved 70 full seconds off the legendary, seemingly untouchable mark set by Jeffrey Mutai way back in 2011. To put that in perspective, it is the 5th fastest marathon time recorded in human history and the fastest run on any marathon course globally in over 2 years.
On the elite women's side, Sharon Lokedi also successfully defended her title, crossing the finish line in 2 hours, 18 minutes, and 51 seconds. She completely dominated the field, finishing nearly a full minute ahead of the closest runner-up. And the American runners had an incredibly historic day, too. Zuhair Talbi finished 5th overall, but set a massive new American course record at 2 hours, 3 minutes, and 45 seconds.
Jess McLean set the new American women's course record at 2:20:49, and the absolute legend Swiss athlete Marcel Hug claimed his staggering 9th wheelchair division title, finishing in 1 hour, 16 minutes, and 6 seconds.
I think the absolute coolest, most mind-bending finisher of the entire day was American astronaut Suni Williams. She just recently returned to Earth after spending 286 days floating in zero gravity on the International Space Station.
She had to rapidly readapt her entire skeletal and muscular system to Earth's gravity, and then she went out and successfully ran the entire Boston Marathon, officially finishing in 5 hours, 52 minutes, and 49 seconds. That is an unbelievable, scientifically baffling display of sheer human endurance and willpower.
It really is. Meanwhile, back in the realm of highly paid professional sports, the NFL is officially back to work. The voluntary off-season workout programs officially kicked off across the league on Monday, and the San Francisco 49ers immediately opened their massive checkbook. They officially signed their star left tackle, Trent Williams, to a massive 2-year, $50 million contract extension.
He is 37 years old. That deal officially makes him the highest-paid offensive lineman in the entire history of the NFL on a per-year basis.
It is $25 million a year for a guy who is 37 years old and takes constant physical abuse. That is exactly how desperate NFL franchises are for elite, proven blindside protection for their quarterbacks. Also making waves on Monday, superstar quarterback Patrick Mahomes surprised a lot of analysts by reporting very early for the start of the Kansas City Chiefs' voluntary off-season program.
Team officials say he is heavily, aggressively rehabbing the torn knee ligaments he suffered late last season, and his surprisingly early appearance at the facility signals a much, much faster physical recovery timeline than anyone in the medical community expected.
Oh, and just to cap off the Chiefs news, tight end Travis Kelce officially put pen to paper, signing his finalized contract to return to the field for the 2026 season, effectively and finally killing all the massive retirement rumors that were aggressively circulating all offseason.
I genuinely don't know how Patrick Mahomes is rehabbing a blown-out knee that fast, but speaking of things moving way too fast and causing a total unpredictable panic on a highway, you have to hear this next one.
We have officially reached the weird news palate cleanser portion of the day, and it starts on a very chaotic highway ramp in the state of Tennessee. On Monday afternoon, a large commercial transport vehicle was involved in a severe rollover crash. The vehicle's highly sensitive cargo, approximately 1 million live, highly agitated bees.
A literal counted million. The violent force of the crash completely breached the containment hives stacked in the back, releasing a massive, furious, buzzing swarm directly onto the active highway. Local media traffic choppers were flying over, jokingly calling it bumper-to-buzzer traffic, but the reality on the ground was terrifying. The highway patrol had to completely forcefully shut down the entire highway ramp for over 5 hours, while specialized local beekeepers, dressed in full protective hazmat-style suits, and emergency first responders desperately tried to wrangle a million angry insects back into containment.
And the absolute best part of this story is the official, publicly released guidance from the local police department to the terrified motorists who were physically trapped in the gridlock traffic next to the swarm. The police simply told them to keep your windows rolled up and remain inside your vehicles.
I absolutely love that official guidance.
Yeah.
Really groundbreaking, highly advanced crisis management right there. I was definitely planning on driving my sedan straight through a literal biblical cloud of a million stinging insects with my sunroof wide open just to see what happens. Just brilliant police work.
Honestly, we have to ask the audience. If you're watching on YouTube right now, drop a comment. Would you rather sit entirely trapped in your compact car, surrounded by a million angry swarming bees for 5 straight hours, or try to tackle a 37-year-old Trent Williams at the line of scrimmage for one play? I think I might actually take my chances with the bees.
The actual financial damage from the crash is actually pretty wild when you look at the agricultural impact. The master beekeepers on the scene estimated that the strict value of the lost agricultural pollination services from this single isolated spill easily exceeded $50,000. And incredibly, if you look at the data, this is already the third major highway closing bee-related traffic incident in the United States in the year 2026 alone. We seriously, desperately need to look into how these commercial transport companies are strapping these fragile highs down, because whatever they're doing is clearly not working.
Finally, to wrap up the day, we are heading over to Europe, specifically Germany. At the famous Berlin Zoo, a very special, highly blood resident just celebrated a massive, scientifically significant milestone. Fatou, a female western lowland gorilla, officially turned 69 years old on Monday.
She is officially verified by Guinness, the world's oldest gorilla currently living in captivity anywhere on Earth. And her origin backstory is crazy. She arrived at the Berlin Zoo way back in 1959 after a random sailor simply brought her over from West Africa to a commercial port in France and traded her to a zoo.
To put her incredible age into proper biological perspective, wild western lowland gorillas typically only live between 35 and 40 years at maximum. Even in highly controlled, medically advanced captivity with perfect diets, they rarely ever exceed 50 years of age. Fatou, officially turning 69, is literally breaking our fundamental understanding of biological science. She is actively sparking a brand new, highly funded international study on primate aging. Global researchers desperately want to analyze her decades of long-term medical records to figure out exactly how her cells are actively defying the normal process of cellular decay.
And the chief zoo officials reported to the press on Monday that she is still in incredibly, surprisingly good health for her age. She hasn't required any major invasive medical interventions for the standard age-related ailments like severe arthritis or heart disease that usually kill older primates. So, to properly celebrate the milestone, the dedicated zoo staff made her a massive, highly specialized birthday cake constructed entirely out of fresh, diet-approved vegetables and fruit, which she happily, peacefully shared with her longtime caregivers. It is honestly just a wholesome, incredible scientific anomaly in a day full of dark news.
Which perfectly brings us to a final, slightly provocative thought for the day. Think deeply about the underlying through line of everything we just covered over the last hour. We have biomedical companies like Passage Bio developing highly advanced gene therapies that can literally, physically halt the atrophy of the human brain. We have Fatou the gorilla, biologically proving that with the exact right environment and medical care, natural mammalian lifespans can be nearly doubled. We are rapidly, inevitably approaching an era where advanced medical technology might allow human beings to routinely, healthily live to be 120 years old. But at the exact same historical moment, massive tech conglomerates like Thomson Reuters are deploying fully autonomous agentic AI agents that can replicate the complex, nuanced analytical thinking of a highly educated junior lawyer in a matter of 3 seconds. Pause for a second and ask yourself, what will you do in a world where humans are living significantly unnaturally longer, but the machines are doing all the cognitive thinking and rapidly taking all the white-collar, high-paying jobs? How do we possibly sustain a global society of healthy centenarians when the foundational middle-class economic ladders are being permanently automated away by algorithms?
It is the single most defining, terrifying economic question of the next decade, and the collision course between biological longevity and artificial intelligence is happening right now in real time.
All right, if we made your drive, your workout, or your downtime even a little bit better today, do us a massive favor. Whether you were watching on YouTube, streaming on Spotify, listening on Apple Podcasts, or literally anywhere else, hit that follow or subscribe button right now. We drop episodes like this every single day, bringing you the world's news in the most interesting way possible. Lock in, because you do not want to miss the crazy stories we have queued up for tomorrow. See you then.